Hello, Choristers and Training Choir. It's Mr. Harrison coming to you from the choir room at the church, and hoping that you and your families are all doing well despite these circumstances. I've missed you, and Mr. Jerningham has missed you very much, and we've been working on tools we can use to still teach you and rehearse with you even from afar, so that's why I'm here today. And this will be the first of a few videos that will hopefully help us keep on track with our training and our musicianship skills and even some repertoire. We'll see how that goes. But we'll review some fundamentals in this video, and this will be mainly for the training choir, I think, but choristers may benefit as well. But I just wanted to give a refresher of a few things. And then in future videos, maybe I'll get a little more high-tech and we can do some sight singing and other exercises like that. So just be on the lookout for that, and know that we, again, miss you very much and look forward to being in person again, but hopefully this will be a fun way to keep us all occupied and doing productive things. So let's get to it.
All right, so let's make sure we know what's going on the page in our music, starting with the names of the notes. We all know what the treble staff is and what the G clef is, the treble clef, called the G clef because, number one, it looks sort of like a really fancy G, and because that little loop-de-loop wraps around the G line. So here we have the G line, and you can see where G is on the keyboard. So that's one of our sort of anchor points. We just know automatically where G is. It's right on that line. And then our other anchor point is C, specifically middle C, which is on that ledger line just below the staff, and we can see where those C's are on the keyboard as well. So C and G, we know where those are, and we can base everything else around that. So then let's go on to line notes and looking at all of the line notes. Here again we see where C and G are, and then our memory trick for each line. There are 5 lines going up the staff, and our little memory trick going up is every good boy does fine on the line. Okay, so those are our line notes. E, G, B, D, and F going up. And then, of course, in between those 5 lines, we have 4 spaces. And for the spaces, our memory trick is that they spell out face going up. So that's face on the space. So that completes our lines and spaces within the staff. And then here we see again where middle C is. But let's look at those spaces just below and just above the staff. What sits just below and just above the staff? Well, we can use the alphabet to find out, right? Because everything's just in alphabetical order going up, line space, starting with middle C. So we have A, B, C, D is on that bottom space. E, F, G is there on the top space above the staff. Okay, so then that completes everything from middle C up to that high G just above the staff. And that's where most of our music falls, as we know. So great, we know where all of the notes are on the staff. So now we're going to look at flats and sharps, because they're important too in knowing exactly what note to sing depending on what key we're in. Flats look like the fancy lowercase b there on the left, and then on the right we see a sharp, which is sort of like a hashtag. A flat lowers a note by a half step, and a sharp raises a note by a half step. And when we say half step, what do we mean? Well, if we look at the piano keyboard, it just means that we go from a white note to a black note, or a black note to a white note, just the very next one up. And if there's no black note above or below a white note, we just go to the next white note above or below. Just right next to each other is where those half steps are. As opposed to whole steps, which we see here, skip over the black note to the next white note, or go from a black note to a black note, skipping over a white note. A whole step can also go from a white note to a black note or a black note to a white note, just skipping over one key, just one piano key. So back to half steps, because that's what's important when we talk about flats and sharps. Let's look at exactly how flats and sharps work by looking at the note D, the white note D, which we would say is D natural. So here we have a natural sign next to the note D. If we replace that natural sign with a flat, what happens? Well, like we said, a flat lowers the note by a half step. So if we're on a white note, which is D natural there, and we go down just one half step, we would end up on a black note. And that black note is D flat. It's now D flat instead of D natural. So then what about sharps? If we replace the natural sign with a sharp sign next to the note D, it will do just like we said, raise the note by a half step. And since we're on a white note, we go to the next black note up. So then if we look at this whole picture, we see that a natural note is always a white note on the keyboard, if we're thinking of a keyboard in our head when we're looking at music. And then flats and sharps are, the majority of the time, black notes on the keyboard. So if we know what flats and sharps do, then we have a pretty good start at looking at key signatures. Key signatures tell us what key a piece of music is in using sharps or flats. Why do we care what key a piece is in? Well, it has everything to do with where the home note is. We were talking about identifying notes on the staff earlier. Each of those notes belongs to a key. It identifies a key. It's the home note for a key. In the key of G major, G is the home note. In the key of A flat major, A flat is the home note. We also know the home note as the tonic note, or when we're sight singing, we call it do. Everything's based off of do, or the tonic, or the home note, the main note in the key. In a diagram called the circle of fifths, we see pretty much every key we're likely to encounter in our singing. We're going to focus on major keys for now, and you'll see that the circle of fifths is laid out much like a clock. And there at the 12 o'clock position, we start out with neither any sharps nor flats. And the major key without any sharps or flats is C major. And we're mostly good at identifying that key for sure. But then as we go around the wheel clockwise, we add one sharp per key. So the next key on the wheel, G major, has one sharp, D major has two sharps, A major has three sharps, and so on. And then if we go counterclockwise, in the flat direction, we add one flat per key. So F major has one flat, B flat has two flats, E flat has three flats, and so on with the major keys. So the circle of fifths turns out to be a pretty handy way to remember how to write key signatures if we're setting out to write music. We'll talk more about how the circle of fifths works later on, but for now, if we're just looking at a piece, especially in our sight singing, and we need to quickly figure out what key we're in, how do we do it? Well, let's look at flat key signatures first. It's easy enough to just memorize that one flat in a key signature means that you're in the key of F major. That's a common enough key, and we encounter it a lot, and we just know it just is. It's just F major. But then, whoa, Mr. Harrison, how do we figure out what seven flats is? We can just memorize what all of these keys are, but if we just need to quickly have a quick visual reference, where do we look? In flat key signatures with more than one flat, it's easy enough to just look at the second to last flat. The second to last flat is the key. That's the end of the story. So in the key we're looking at here, the second to last flat lies on a space. So what memory trick do we use to remember what the name of that particular space on the staff is. Face on the space. And so here we see that that second to last flat is on the C space. So we are in the key of C flat. So then what about sharps? Well, much like flats, where if we just have one flat, we automatically know it's F major, because that's a pretty common key to find. It's the same with sharps. If we just have one sharp, it's easy enough to just remember that one sharp is G major. That one sharp in the key of G major is F sharp. And in every major sharp key signature, we can look to the last sharp to find out what the key is. We just go up one half step from that last sharp, and that tells us the key. So we would look at F sharp and go up one half step to G, and we would know that it's G major. So then, whoa, Mr. Harrison, we have 4 sharps in the key signature. What in the world is the key? Let's look at that last sharp. It's on a line, so our memory trick for line notes tells us that that's every good boy does, D. That sharp is a D sharp. So one half step up from that D sharp is E, meaning that we're in the key of E major. So that's our little refresher for everything up to identifying keys. So especially the training choir, I would advise that you watch this video several times and just make sure you know those memory tricks, and we can keep getting better at identifying those keys as we go.